Apple has released the new iPhone 14 Pro, which I picked up during the release and have been testing ever since. For the last 2 years, I have been using iPhone 11, and I felt like it was time for an upgrade. Was it worth it? Let's find out. As a disclaimer, Apple did not send me this phone, and I have paid for it with my own money. In this review, I will not be focusing on the dynamic island, the new chip, overall usage, etc. There are plenty of channels that you can watch that will do a better job than me when it comes to that. Initially, when thinking about this video, I was just gonna focus on the camera system since that is what I do for a living. But during my usage, the other thing that caught my eye was the display, and specifically the brightness of it. But we will get into that later in the video. This year, Apple has finally upgraded the camera. It now features a 48 megapixel sensor. You get a choice of 4 focal lengths: 13mm ultra-wide, 24mm wide, 48mm medium, and 77mm telephoto. I have to note that the 48mm focal length still uses the main 24mm lens, but by utilizing the larger sensor and pixel binning technology, it can still deliver 12 megapixel photos. And while the quality will not be exactly the same as shooting with a dedicated lens, you really have to be nitpicky about it to see any difference. The other focal lengths utilize a dedicated lens on the phone. Each focal length is capable of taking 12 megapixel photos by default and 48 megapixel photos when ProRes is enabled. With all of this technical jargon out of the way, let's talk about the actual quality of the photos. My first impression was, wow, this is a definite improvement over the iPhone 11 that I was using previously. Low light has been improved, and even though the photos still look like they've been shot with a phone, it looks a lot better than on previous generations of iPhone. My only complaint is that there is a significant amount of blooming around the highlights like street lamps, etc., but that is the limitation of the sensor. Maybe there is a software trick that Apple can develop in the future to help with that. The depth of field also looks better and more natural on iPhone 14 due to a new sensor. Overall, the level of detail is a lot higher, as well as the ability to shoot RAW enables me to edit these photos to my liking later on, and I think they look pretty good. Let me know what you think down in the comments. I would also notice here that Apple by default does not let you change ISO and shutter speed. If you want those controls, you need to download a third-party app like Lightroom Mobile, etc. More on that in the video section. I have to say that nowadays when I travel, I sometimes don't even bring my professional camera with me. I just bring my phone, because the quality is really good and I don't have to walk around the city with a huge camera. I still love all of my professional equipment, but sometimes I just want to go light and have the least amount of stuff with me. And I'm really happy that phone cameras are getting better and better and allowing us to do that. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the video aspects of the phone, since this is where I really see a big improvement. First of all, you can shoot up 4K up to 60 FPS on the phone with no crop on any focal length, which is great for action shots that can be slowed down in post. You can also shoot 120 or 240 FPS in 1080 for super slow motion, but keep in mind that you will need a lot of light to be available for that footage to look good. Shooting in low light with those modes is not really great, but the same can be said of the professional cameras. We now also have cinematic mode on both rear and front cameras of the phone. For me, this is fantastic. Phones nowadays are the primary device for recording video by people, be it cat videos at home, Instagram posts, YouTube shorts, etc. I have spent a lot of time editing people's phone videos that were shot with crappy backgrounds where I could see everything. And the fact that this phone can now blur the background out on the front camera is a welcomed addition on my end. Cinematic mode does a decent job at blurring the background behind people, but when it comes to other things, the software limitations start to show, like you see in this flower video here. Cinematic mode is also limited to only 24 or 30 frames per second. Another addition that Apple introduced is the ability to shoot ProRes. Here are my thoughts, which will sound scandalous. Apple put the cart before the horse on this one. Allow me to elaborate. While it might sound cool to say that you can shoot ProRes on a phone, in practical terms there are a lot of limitations that will make the use of that codec difficult or impractical. First, the file sizes using ProRes are huge. 1 minute of 4K 24 FPS ProRes is almost 6 gigs. Furthermore, you won't be able to even shoot 4K ProRes unless you opt out for a 256GB model, like I did. And in that case, you only get 30 minutes of ProRes recording using the entire memory of your phone. And as we all know, Apple does not let us put microSD cards or any cards for that matter, even SIM cards, into an iPhone nowadays. Second point related to file sizes is the Lightning connector that Apple uses on iPhone, which is still locked into USB 2.0 protocol, which caps out at 480 megabits per second. So it will take a while for you to get the footage off the phone if you shoot ProRes. You can always use AirDrop or Wi-Fi, but that can even be slower depending on your environment. Third point is the software. Apple says, hey, y'all can shoot ProRes because we cater to the pros. But Apple does not even give us white balance control. WTF, Apple? Furthermore, Apple's aperture control only controls the depth of field and not the actual exposure. Instead, we have to go to exposure compensation to control the amount of light that gets on the sensor. What would make a lot more sense is having a professional level menu, like many Android phones have by the way, which will allow us to control aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. And here's an idea, and this is a really big reach, but how about if Apple allows us to record ProRes, it will also give us the ability to shoot in log. Since the main advantage of ProRes footage is the higher latitude in post, then shooting log makes the most sense for future color grading. I know there's Filmic Pro app that fixes a lot of these issues, even though I have not played around with it yet because it's not free, but if the name of the phone is iPhone 14 Pro, then maybe it's worthwhile for Apple to give us the Pro features that the name actually implies. I always use the following analogy in my teaching when students tell me that they want a Pro cinema camera like a Red or an Airy because it looks cool. What they don't realize is that in order to make that camera operational, they need really expensive media, rigging, PL lenses, servicing, crew, etc. They focus on putting the cart before the horse, focusing on the cool factor while forgetting about the practicality of having such a tool. I'm afraid when it comes to ProRes on iPhone 14 Pro, Apple has made the same mistake. Cool, but impractical. Okay, now that I crapped all over Apple for ProRes, let's talk about something that I actually think is both cool and practical, and that is the new action mode that Apple implemented on the iPhone. This feature I actually like a lot, and it's really cool and works great. I had a trip to Colorado and my buddy and I went hiking in a mountain, which proved to be a great testing ground for a lot of the features on this phone. I tested the action mode while going up a mountain and it worked really great, as you can see here yourselves. There are certain limitations when it comes to the action mode, however. You can only do 2.8K, but up to 60 FPS, which is great. You cannot do 120 or 240 in the action mode, however, which would be cool in the future. Hint, hint, Apple. One limitation is the focal length. While all focal lengths are available when shooting the action mode, I recommend sticking to the ultra-wide. There is a slight crop in the footage when the action mode is enabled, and having the widest possible focal length works the best in this case. Another limitation of the action mode is the level of detail. Again, because it is 2.8K, shooting in low light is not really a great idea, since the footage will not look that good. The final limitation of the action mode is the iPhone itself. Unlike a GoPro, which has a rugged build, I can't really see an iPhone being rigged on a mountain bike, a helmet, or going underwater without heavy rigging. You can do it, but you will be taking a risk. However, even with all of these limitations, I really like the fact that Apple basically gave us a limited version of the GoPro for no extra money, and this feature will definitely expand people's creative possibilities. Now, let's go back and talk about the screen. Apple has upgraded the display on an iPhone 14 Pro to be 2000 nits in brightness. What that means is that the screen is a lot more usable in bright sunlight. And at first I thought, cool, so what? But then I realized who will benefit from that the most, and that is the drone pilots, especially those who do not have a dedicated control screen like DJI, Crystal Sky, or similar. For me, as well as other people who use their phones as the main piloting display for flying a drone, this is a lifesaver because it makes our job a lot easier. Since the beginning, I had to stand in the shade or drape a cloth over the controller to be able to see the screen when flying, but I'm happy to say that this is a lot easier now. Just thought that you guys would want to hear that. There's also another thing I'm going to mention. I have seen a few people comparing this phone and other to a dedicated cinema camera or a high-end mirrorless camera. In my opinion, this comparing apples to oranges. These are different tools designed for different jobs, and comparing those to me just sounds kind of silly. Both a Ferrari and a minivan have their uses. Same logic applies here. To answer the age-old question, which camera is the best? The one that you have with you. That's it. So in conclusion, let's talk about the most important question. Should you buy the phone? And the answer is complicated. I've seen a few YouTubers actually recommending people not to upgrade from their previous phones, in some cases going back as far as the iPhone 11, which is where I'm coming from. And I don't agree. I think that if you are coming from iPhone 11 or 12 and you really care about the camera quality, you will see the benefits of the new iPhone 14 Pro. If you are on an iPhone 13, I still think you will see some improvements because of the new sensor, but I also think you can wait until next year. That is up to you. If you are on an Android and you want to jump over to the iPhone ecosystem, then I think it's a good time. But I would really pay attention to the features that you want out of the device and compare it to the phone you already have. Some Android cameras might be better, but they might not have the same abilities as this iPhone. So what I would say is go to an Apple store or find out if a friend of yours has one and do the comparison yourself. Finally, I want to say that all of these things are just tools. Your creative vision is the main thing that will dictate the necessity of some tools over others. Don't let these tech reviews make you feel as if you're missing out on something. We all have our different preferences and financial situations, and we must base our purchases on those factors. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Please subscribe to the channel and let me know if you have any questions about iPhone 14 or any video tech in general. Thanks for watching, and I will see y'all in the next video.